Hello and welcome to my top 25 player list for the upcoming Raleigh Major. Now this is just players from teams that are going to Raleigh. So on the right you can see the entire list. We've got all of EU, we've got all of NA, we've got OCE, SAM, MENA, APAC, and SSA. Now when I first made this list, I had 25 and then I had 8 honorable mentions, and I decided to actually remove the honorable mentions because it was kind of getting ridiculous, and it was to like the point where it wasn't even worth having that many honorable mentions because it was kind of a cop-out. So without further ado, let's go ahead and just go, I think, 5 players at a time. So let's go 25 through 21, and I'm going to talk about each player here. So, in 25th place, I have Banana Head, my favorite OCE player and who I think is the most impactful player in OCE, most likely to lead his team to victory over other teams at Raleigh and in these LAN events. He plays well on LAN, he plays well online, and I think he's the highest impact player on his team. Fever and Torsos also very good, very solid players, but I do think Banana Head is above both of them, and so I put him in here as the OCE representative. He is the highest and only player I have in my top 25 of the 6 players on the right. You can see in this yellow section, all the 6 players. Banana Head's the only one I put in the top 25 just because I think there's so much talent in these other players that if any player above here went to OCE, I would expect them to be on the winning team, assuming they had, competent teammates and all that. So I have him at 25. 24, Kofer, NA. This one probably a little bit more on the controversial side. So SSG, a little bit tough to rank because who do you consider the most impactful? Reveal, Kofer, or Scribbles? I think it's totally up for debate, but based on what we're seeing from how SSG is doing after putting Kofer into their lineup versus before when they had Frosty, Kofer he creates a ton of opportunities for his teammates with physical play, because we saw a ton of demos from him in Open 6 that they won here in NA. And he was really the key piece of that successful strategy. I think Reveal and Scribbles both played fantastic, so no discount to them, but I do think Kofer of those 3 is the best player, and the question is how well is this going to do on LAN? I would say a physical playstyle like this, I expect to go well on LAN versus his teammates maybe slightly more mechanical. Often what we've seen from these in-person LAN events is the more mechanical players that do really well online. It's a little bit more difficult to be that mechanical when you're in a new setting, unfamiliar, everything, different monitor, different gaming PC. I mean, you've got the same controller and you've got the same teammates, but there's just so much else going on that I think the style of being more physical translates better to LAN because it requires less finesse is the way I would describe it. And it's not like Kofer can't do incredible things in the air. We saw him score some crazy goals in Open 6, and so I have very high expectations for SSG, but he is the highest SSG player I have on my list. So you guys let me know if you think that's controversial or what you think about that. If you think Reveal or Scribbles is more impactful than Kofer, I would love to hear your takes. 23, Seiko. Gentlemates kind of, I wouldn't say snuck their way back in, but they basically re-rostered, right? So it's Juicy, Seiko, and Eugen. Juicy hasn't really been impressing me so far this season. Seiko's been solid, and then of course in Split 1, these guys had Radosin, and then in Split 2, they've replaced him with Eugen, and they've catapulted themselves into the Raleigh Major by doing that. So as a spoiler, I do have Eugen higher than Seiko. And Juicy, I do not have on my top 25 list right now because I don't think he's been a top 25 performer yet. I do think that's within the realm of possibility. But this list, I'm going to try to stay more focused on the actual list itself and not go and talk about every single player on the right because I could do that all day. So Seiko, he is very talented. He's an excellent land player, and he has results. So we know what he's done, and based on knowing what he's done and how he's playing now, I think we can continue to expect him to see him do well at Raleigh as a high performer. I think Gentlemates has some hype, but honestly is still one of the sleeper teams where if they came out and won the entire major, maybe some people would be shocked, but I don't think I would be shocked based on what we've seen. They think they have the potential to win any given Sunday, that sort of thing. So I put Seiko in there, and I think he's the second most impactful person on that team. I think he's a steadying presence, and that is why I ranked him 23rd. 22, I have Magic Bear. And maybe that's controversial, right? Because, Magic Bear higher than Seiko when Seiko has all these accomplishments, real land wins, all that, and Magic Bear is kind of relatively new up-and-comer to the scene. But I think Magic Bear, between him, I'm just going to highlight the team because I feel like that's a useful way of looking at it. Between Justin, Cheese, and Magic Bear, I do think Magic Bear has the spark amongst those three to be the leader on offense for the team and create a lot of opportunities. And he's kind of their not so secret weapon. So I do put Magic Bear as the highest rank member of Gen G on my list. That doesn't mean I don't think Justin or Cheese are very talented players. I just don't know. Maybe Cheese you could put top 25, but then you're this is just so much talent. It's hard to decide who's going to get bumped out if you added like Cheese or Justin to the top 25. So to me, Magic Bear is the most impactful player on that team. He's carried them through some series wins. They've had some peaks. They've had some valleys. But so far, this team looks very good. And I've seen from a lot of the comments in my videos that there's a lot of people behind this team and wanting them to do great. So wishing the best for them. At 21, I have Rise, a player that I feel like is a little bit under the radar. And you guys let me know what you think, because this MENA region is extremely stacked. And as a spoiler, I've got 5 out of the 6 players from MENA in my top 25 list, which is higher density than any other list. Well, maybe EU is close, but you can see there's a ton of talent. Rise has not just historical results, but his historical results are great on LAN, and he's just a solid player. He seems to always rise to the occasion. You don't see very many games or series where he plays down to the other team. He's usually playing very well. So I think he's a sleeper top 20 type selection. I do think he gets overshadowed by Nupo, who I'm very high on right now as a spoiler. And then to me, he's clearly more impactful than Atomic is. No offense to Atomic with the K here on their team for Twisted Minds. But so that's why I put Rise in there. Solid player, great play style, very impactful, but also not as flashy as Nupo. So I think he flies under the radar. He scores a lot of the cleanup goals for their team. Let's go next 5. I think that's a good way to do this. Now let's talk some controversy. Okay. After Rise, I have Jorius as 20. And I've, very positive about this Dignitas team we're seeing in Split 2, right? They have really performed. Not only have they been doing well, they actually won Open 5. And Jorius was definitely a key part of that. He had some really clutch moments, played really well on defense. Seems like he seems to be pretty solidly third man, but I mean, it's Rocket League rotation, so he's going to score and take it up the field every once in a while. But it does seem like behind Stizzy and apparently Jack, Jorius is playing extremely solid, but I think those other 2 players are playing better than him. And I think we need to respect recent results. And when it comes to recent results, Dignitas is really impressing me and pretty much everyone else. They're number 2 in Europe right now, and they've beaten Vitality multiple times now to the point where until we see them on LAN, we're going to assume that Dignitas is the better team, at least in this moment. I'm going to say we, as in me. You might feel differently. If you do, let me know in the comments. But I think, Jorius, very solid player. I do think apparently Jack and Stizzy are a little bit more impactful, so I actually have them higher on my list here that we'll be talking about. I keep spoiling these results ahead of me, but it's hard to talk about these players when I have other players on their team on the list, right? Because you do kind of have to rank them against themselves. So Jorius at 20. I've got Lost at 19 for Sam. Now, Furia having really good results. They did lose Open 4 in the grand finals, but from what I've seen online, Lost had internet issues that were creating lag and making it difficult for him to play effectively. So maybe put an asterisk on the Open 4 loss. They won Open 5 and Open 6 pretty convincingly. So I'm really high on Lost. I think Yan and Lost are the two standout players from there. And I do think that Drafinho is solid, but I don't put him top 25 at the moment. Do you guys think that's disrespect? You let me know. It's very clear to me he is obviously the best KBM player in the world right now, at least to me. And so he's definitely the best, but I don't think, based on everyone else on this list, that I put him into the top 25. I think if you're going to replace any player on the Furia roster, it's probably Drafinho, and it's probably you poach Swift from Team Secret and bring him on. I mean, imagine Yan, Lost, and Swift. I hope they do that next year, assuming Drafinho's done and ready to move to something else. But yeah, that's kind of my thinking. I like Lost. I think he has really dynamic offense. It does seem like the Furia playstyle has shifted to favor more offense by Lost. So I think that is really strong playstyle adjustment, because they're getting their teams were finding out that you could shut down Yan, and if you shut down Yan, it kind of shut down the offense. So I think they've really made a conscious effort to make Lost more player one of the series, and that gives Yan a little bit more room to cook in the midfield and clean up some of Lost's first man attacks. 18, I've got Chronic for NA. Chronic, to me, as a spoiler, I do not have LJ on this list. Maybe a hot take. I do think Chronic was more impactful than LJ when it comes to the Ultimates results. He, to me, is a player that has a very high peak, and when he plays very well with confidence, I think he's a top 5 player in the world. Like he's extremely on when he's in his flow state. His actual ceiling of how good he is at the game, I think, is way up there. He can attack very creatively, and every once in a while you see him doing some really creative things on the pitch that you don't see many other players capable of doing. So I'm very high on Chronic. I say that, but I have him at 18 out of 25, so you let me know what you think. To me, I have First Killer as more impactful, so he's higher on my list here. And then I don't currently have LJ ranked, but I had him in my honorable mentions list that I had brought up at the beginning. So I think Chronic at 18 is solid. He's a very solid player. He's, to me, kind of the core of Ultimate success. Like when he plays well, Ultimates play well. When he plays poorly, Ultimates play poorly. So he's very much the barometer of how that team does. 17. The modern GOAT, Monkey Moon. Now, maybe this is a controversial take. I have Monkey Moon from Team Vitality as number 17. I think he's been showing some signs of coming alive, and the main critique that I have of them is this team was supposed to be number 1, or at least very clearly number 2, but now they've started struggling against Dignitas. Dignitas seems to have them figured out. Carmine definitely has them figured out, and so I think it's on the coaches to come up with some new strategies to beat the other two teams, because Vitality is very solidly EU3 right now based on recent results. Maybe that'll change on LAN. Monkey Moon is a very talented LAN player. He's a very clutch LAN player, so I expect him to do well, but I don't think he was as impactful as he could be, and as he historically has been for his teams that he's been on. So I'm hoping that he has a big Raleigh event, because that would be great for his legacy, because this season he's not looking like the best player on the team, but he's still a top player in the world. It's tough to rank that type of thing, right? When you expect someone to do so well. I have to put him as mid-tier, high-tier, 17 best in the world at the moment. Number 16, Eugen. Now, here's an interesting thing, right? Look at how I have Seiko down here at 23. I have Yujin at 16. Why am I so high on Yujin? And this was something I was really considering as I was putting this list together. So I think Yujin is similar to what I was talking about with the Kofor edition, where it seems like Yujin has unlocked Juicy and Seiko to play better, which is ironic because Yujin's the rookie, right? Or he's the newer player. And so I think when it comes to impact on offense, defense, and midfield, Yujin is actually the biggest impact player over Seiko and Juicy right now. And no disrespect to those two guys. I think they're both fantastic players, but I do think Yujin has been the standout player and the difference maker for them. And he's the one that comes up clutch, and he's the one that's playing fearless against some of these other top teams. Gentlemates have shown that they can beat Carmine Corp in games. I think they went 4-2 in recent history, or they won 2 games. Carmine won 4, so obviously they lost the series. But winning 2 games against the best team in the world, if you can win 2, you can win 4, right? So I think they've shown that they have the capability to beat this team of Carmine Corp, and if you can beat Carmine Corp, then you can be best in the world. It's really that simple. So I'm relatively high on Yujin. I think he's going to be a name that we're going to be saying a lot over the next couple of years of his career. And this is just the beginning for him. I expect great things for him in his career. And I think he is definitely the difference maker. And he is pretty much the electricity of Gentlemates that they were missing when they had Radosin. So I think that's the reality of the situation. Let's do 15 through 11 now. Nope. Maybe I should add sound effects. Okay. Now, let's get some NA people back in here. I have Atomic at number 15. Now, if you watched my first top 25 list from before the Birmingham major, I actually had Atomic, I believe, in fifth place. So I was extremely high on Atomic. He's had a bit of, I wouldn't say, he definitely hasn't had a poor split, but he's not peaking as hard. I think his teammates are doing a little bit better than he is. We haven't been seeing the Atomic threat as much in Split 2, in my opinion. However, I still put him as an extremely high player in the world. And I basically pretty much just have positive things to say about people from this point on. And I think that's a good way to keep it, because I can nitpick them, but I still consider them a top player in the entire world, right? So Atomic, very critical piece. I think he enables beast mode in Daniel's offense very well. He's solid on defense. He's a great, I think he's really talented on LAN, clearly has the results, has the history. And I think, to me, it's like if NRG wins Raleigh and wins World, I do think Atomic becomes the GOAT of NA at that point. I think those results are actually the ticket for him being the GOAT, because when you look at he has good results and he has a great career history. If he could just get those 2 wins, I think it's very realistic that in NA we will consider him the best to ever have done it in RLCS. I think he is close to that status just based on getting some results. Now, if we look at just the play style, because there's results and there's play style, right? And so there's a balance on this type of list. I think Atomic has both. He has results, he has play style. I think he does a great job of enabling his teammates. He's the type of guy where if you put him on a different team in NA, you expect that team to be a top 2 or 3. So I think, when I saw some rumblings in the offseason of Atomic going with First Killer and LJ to play on the Ultimates, I thought, like, that team is going to be really good, because who's Daniel and Beast Mode going to pick up that's better than Atomic at complementing them? Probably nobody in the world. So I do think NRG has built a very good chemistry, and they have good natural chemistry to even start. So I'm very high on Atomic. I'm very high on NRG. I think they're going to do great. I had them ranked as number 3 team in the world in my review. Well, I guess maybe I shouldn't do too many spoilers of that. If you want to see my top team rankings, watch my previous video on this YouTube channel. Number 14, Apparently Jack. Apparently Jack is peaking super hard, right? He played incredible He's really the rock of this Dignitas team, and I think he's really enabled Stizzy and Jorius to play well, and he's also playing fantastic himself. So I think he is a very high impact player. I think without apparently Jack, and you put in another skilled player from Europe, I don't think Dignitas is a top 4 team without apparently Jack. I think he is a core piece of that team being a top 4 team in EU. And maybe that sounds, I think there's going to be people who are like, yeah, of course. And there's going to be people that think maybe that is a hot take. I do think apparently Jack is the reason why this team is top 4. If he's not on this team, I don't think they're top 4. So maybe I should have him higher than Stizzy, which we'll get to at number 12 here, obviously. But I think that apparently Jack, high impact offense, excellent defense, excellent 1v1 playing, and doing a good job of eliminating the first man. When he's the first man, he does a very good job of getting either a 50 or getting past the first challenger to then create that 2v2 for his teammates or the 2v1 for his teammates. And I think he does a fantastic job of that when I watch. Now, number 13, Clears, Mina. Falcons. Now, as a spoiler, I actually have him as the least, or the highest, no, what's the right way to say this? He has the highest ranking, or the lowest ranking of his teammates. What's the correct way to say that? Anyways, I'm not going to edit any of that out, so you can kind of see what it's like to make these type of videos. But he is 13. I have his teammates higher on this list, at a lower rank, I should say. So I think he is still showing he is a top player, extremely talented, and very impactful. I think he has very dynamic offense. His combination with TRK and Rawas is very strong, and I think he's a great player. I put him in the same category as Stizzy, really. I think Stizzy and Clears are kind of in a similar boat where they're both the more dynamic, maybe slightly more flashy offensive presence on their team that creates some unique opportunities and some unique looks in those 5-minute matches. You need somebody that can do a little sparking, I think. And I think Clears does that for Falcons, and I think Stizzy does that for Dignitas. So rolling right into number 12 at Stizzy, I think you can see I've got all of Dignitas here. I've got 12 Stizzy, 14 Jack, 20 Jorius. So I'm very high on this team. I think, and it's not for a bad reason. They have performed extremely well. They've beaten Vitality. They've really shown that they can be the number 2 team in EU. And so what we see from them on LAN is going to be super interesting. They got some experience last time, but they didn't make it through the Swiss because they had lost to team GK, another talented EU team who's not going to Raleigh, but that's a whole different thing. But I expect good results from this crew of Dignitas, and I don't think any one of them is significantly outperforming the other, which creates a very dangerous challenge for these other teams that are going to play against them, right? Because there's not one player you can isolate and say, hey, if we just take this player out, then we've got a 3v2. No, Stizzy, apparently Jack, Jorius, you got to worry about all 3 of them. All 3 mechanical, all 3 of them can take it from the back wall and score it. All 3 of them can dribble it up and score it. All 3 of them can pass to their teammates. All 3 of them can play defense. Stizzy has made really good strides on defense. He didn't look as strong at the beginning of the year. Now he's looking very strong on defense, or at least he's looking world class, top 12 player in the world to me. And I think he's playing with that swagger and confidence that comes from playing very well. So I expect him to continue doing well. Number 11, Beast Mode. Now, as you can see, I've got Atomic here and Beast Mode here, which means I've got Daniel up here somewhere. So why do I have Beast Mode in the middle? Well, I think he's been kind of in the middle between Daniel and Atomic for Split 2. He's been very solid. He's had some great games. He's had some games where he, to me, of all the players you watch play in the world, he's the one where you can tell when he flips the switch and he says, nah, I'm not interested in losing this game. And that you can tell there's a moment where Beast Mode will supercharge and play really way more aggressive and way more dynamic and go for some really unique touches that other players on this list cannot make. They can't make that in those type of clutch situations. Beast mode's also very clutch on LAN, I think. So, this NRG team is very good on LAN. They won an event last year. They went to the grand finals of all 3 events last year. In Birmingham, obviously they got shut down in a Game 7 OT loss to Ultimates, but they were top 4. So I expect this team to continue doing extremely well. And I expect Beast Mode to continue doing great. So I think you can make an argument that Beast Mode is top 10, but in my mind, I have Daniel as a more impactful player. All right, let's go 10 through 6 now. And then I'll do one at a time after that. Okay, number 10, TRK. I think last time I had TRK as a higher impact player than Rawas and Clears, but I really like how Rawas has been playing the last couple opens and what I'm seeing from him. So I think TRK is kind of slotted a little bit more to that middle ground where he is the solid rock of that team, which is kind of ironic, right? Because Clears and Rawas are twins and they've had that twinergy of always playing extremely well together, but it really seems like TRK is fully integrated into that. And this team, I expect Falcons to do extremely well. No spoilers for my ranking video, but I have them extremely high on the list, higher than I've seen other people put them on the top global ranking list. So I'm very optimistic about this Falcons team at this event. I think they're peaking at the right time. TRK plays very solid on LAN, very predictable, good play style on LAN. He doesn't flame out, or you don't really see too many series where you're like, oh, TRK threw that. If anything, you might say Clears is a little bit shakier on LAN. So I think TRK is more steady, and so I have him higher on my list, and I think he's a top 10 player in the world, or at least right on that bubble. I think you could argue Beast Mode and TRK. You could put Beast Mode over TRK. I wouldn't be mad at that. But I do think these guys are, when you start reaching that next tier of pro, that really S tier pro, however you want to say it, the best of the best. First Killer, NA. Always controversial figure. Every time I make videos about him or I reference him, there's comments for both ways. And it does seem like he's garnered some, I wouldn't say haters, but definitely people who critique him and his style. And I think that's fair. Every player on this list is worthy of some level of criticism, but I think you can't deny that he is super impactful. There's some things that maybe if they sanded off some of his edges, he would be a little bit smoother at these events and perform a little bit better. But at the same time, like those jagged edges that he has is kind of part of what makes him the player that he is, and he gives him those dynamic offensive capabilities. And to me, it kind of feels like, as someone who generally is a Daniel fan and follows the teams that Daniel's on, and I like NRG, First Killer is kind of that villain character against NRG, right? Like he knows how to beat that team, and to me, it's kind of like if he can beat that team, then I expect great results. I think he was the most impactful player from Ultimates when they went to grand finals at Birmingham. I think he was the most impactful player, open 4 through 6. So I continue to put First Killer as a top 10 player. I don't think he's top 5 based on those issues that we talked about, but I think he's undeniably high scoring and high octane type player. And I feel like you can't make a top 25 player list without putting him like top 10. I really think he is that impactful, unless you're very critical of the mistakes he's made, which he's made mistakes. So let's talk Atto here. I've got Atto as 8. He is the first Carmine Core person I have on this list, so you can probably tell I'm very high on this K-Corp team, right? If he's the first one and he's an 8th, that means I must think very highly of the other players on this team, right? So I think Atto, super dynamic player. I think he's another one of those players where I talk about on absolute skill ceiling peak. He probably the best player in the world, right up there with Zen. The floor is maybe a little bit lower. I think sometimes in the series where K-Corp doesn't win, he looks kind of flat. Like it looks like he's not really playing up to his standard. And it does kind of feel like K-Corp, When they lose, it's because it looks like their communication kind of breaks down, where they start either stop trusting each other or they trust each other too much and they can't find that right balance. And I think Atto is usually the one that kind of falls into that. And of the three players on that team between Raleigh, Vatir, and Atto, I do think you see a little bit more mistakes from Atto than the other two players. Some of that's play style because Atto is very dynamic, very mechanical. But obviously he's still a top 10 player. So, maybe compared to his teammates, I wouldn't put him as the best, but I think you put Atto on basically any other team in the world, that team's going to be a challenger, right? Like he's going to be probably the best player on that team if he gets moved to a different team. So I don't think you can discount him too much. Zen at 7 and Daniel above Zen. Interesting takes maybe. Zen continues to be the leading force of Vitality, and until otherwise, he's still Zen. He's still doing very mechanical, consistent moves, creating interesting offense. Arguably, maybe one of the best defensive players, right up there with Rawas, probably on defensive skill. I think Zen, because his offense is so strong, people can overlook his defense, but I would consider him a top defensive player. Like Daniel, Rawas, Zen, I guess those are probably my top 3 defensive players in the world. With what they can do with low to no boost, their last man, they've got some other player coming at 100 boosts from the ceiling. I want one of those 3 players in the net to do the defense, right? So Zen, super clutch, typically a very strong LAN performer. Obviously, last year, bit of a fluke year for them. This year, bit of a rough start. I still think very talented player. I chalk some of Vitality's issues up to coaching and strategy choices. And I think I put them in the same category as Furia, where teams figured out, hey, if you shut down Zen, the team's got nothing. Monkey Moon and Exotic can't get it done. So we're just going to get Zen out of there and make him as disengaged as possible and disrespect his, maybe disrespect isn't the right word. Basically, just go for 50s and stuff. Like, just get the ball off of his car. Get the ball away from him. If we can keep the ball away from Zen, we can win the game. Because his other 2 teammates aren't carrying as hard as Zen can carry. And I think Zen, if you take Zen off of Vitality, which I know is kind of a silly statement, and it's just Monkey Moon and Exotic and some other, high level EU player, I don't think Vitality's top 4, because Monkey Moon, he plays well, but he hasn't shown the peak that we need from him. Zen still has that peak. I think this is another team where Vitality wins on LAN. It's going to be one of those things where it's like, hey, this is a LAN team. They play great on LAN. Don't worry so much about opens 1 through 3 and 4 through 6, because those are online events, not the same thing as playing in front of a crowd. So I think, Zen plays well in front of people, and super clutch player, still top 10, certainly. Daniel, to me, the best player in NA at the moment, and I think he's been the leader that NRG has needed through some tough times. I think to me, without going too much in the skill, I want to take this in a slightly different angle. So he didn't compete in the 1v1 series for RLCS. I think that was kind of notable because most people expect Daniel to do that because he's historically been a very talented 1v1 player. And he's got some wins over other world-class talent, and he's won multiple... Well, I don't know how many Salt Mine 1v1 Johnny Boy events he's won, but I think he's won at least one, maybe more. And he's kind of considered a top 1v1 player. And apparently, from what we've seen, he doesn't want to play once. He's very focused on 3v3. And as a 3v3 RLCS enjoyer, I'm like, so you mean the player I consider to be my favorite player is locked in a basement, grinding this game just to bring the trophy, keep the trophy from Raleigh in the US? I'm all in. So I'm very excited for Daniel. I hope we see some of that grind and effort he's been putting in. He's like, I can't even worry about 1v1. I don't even want to think about it. I'm a 3v3 player, and I want to be the best 3v3 player in the world. That's what I want my legacy to be. That's what it sounded like from seeing their coach Sathu's interviews and comments on that. So I expect Daniel to do well. I think he's arguably top 3 defender in the world. His offense is also super dynamic. Sometimes he does things with the ball that teams just don't expect to be possible inside the game of Rocket League. I can think of a couple moments off the top of my head already. And I still consider him there. I don't put him top 5 at the moment because I don't... I think here's the thing that's tough about that. If they would have won Open 6 instead of being Final 4 contestant in going out 3rd, 4th place, I think I put Daniel top 5. But because they didn't get that result, I think I have to penalize them a little bit and put teams that did win above that, generally speaking. And I say generally speaking because you're going to see maybe I have slightly more controversial picks there. Let's go to 5. So from here, we'll go one at a time. 5, Rawas. Interesting. So we've kind of covered him already based on how TRK and Clears are playing extremely well. I do think Rawas is showing even more skill. I think he came out a little bit slow at the beginning of this year, and we can expect great things from him at this upcoming major. And I think he's the extremely talented, high impact player, great offense, great defense, and I expect continued great things from him. So I do put Rawas over Daniel here, and I think that's mostly a little bit results biased based. I think winning all 3 events in MENA is extremely impressive because I'm very high on Twisted Minds as a team, even though I don't think MENA is as deep of a region as NA is. I think NA has more depth, but the top teams in MENA, I think, are on par with the top NA teams. So, I think Rawas I put in there as the dominant leader of MENA right now. Of results in MENA, I should say, because I haven't put Nupo yet on this list, as you'll see. But I think based on teamwork and stuff like that, I think Rawas is a top 5 player right now. Number 4, Yan the Man, and our top Sam player. Yan he's one of those guys that I knew he's kind of flashy, but doesn't it feel like he goes under the radar a little bit when we talk about top 5 lists? I think Yan is just so impactful. It'd be really curious. We only get to see them at these LAN events against other players, but would love to see, more Sam versus EU, Sam versus NA matchups. I wish they did more cross-regional stuff, not just these Raleigh and Birmingham and Worlds. I wish there was more cross-regional stuff in between those events because I would love to see Yan play against NA and EU players if they could figure out a way to do that. That would be incredible as a fan because we only get to see him play at these LAN events, and he does fantastic at basically every LAN he plays at. And the open results were extremely strong. Now, obviously, they lost Open 4 to Team Secret here, but there's asterisks on that. I kind of covered that earlier. And I think Yan is still clearly by far the best player in Sam. Extremely talented offense. So I'm very high on Yan. If you told me you had Rawas, Daniel, Zen, Atto, or First Killer over Yan, or TRK over Yan, I'd be like, yeah, not a bad pick. But without Yan, this Sam isn't a top 4 region. So to me, he's top 5 player because he is the impact of that region, and he is the reason why Sam is where it is nowadays. Now, obviously, he stands on the shoulders of other fantastic players, even like some of these players that we see on this list here. But I do think Yan is the most impactful player, and if you shuffled him around to other teams, those teams are going to do fantastic. Number 3, Vatira. Okay, so Vatira, to me, I think he is the best 3rd man in Rocket League right now. And what I mean by that is typically for them, Atto and Raleigh are seems like they're either the 1st or 2nd man leading the ball up the court, and Vatira is typically playing defense and shadowing the play and predicting where the play is going to go. To me, when I watch them play, Vatira really is the key piece of keeping pressure. And it does seem like it's tough to do this without pulling up an example, but it seems like a core part of the Carmine Corps' pressure is they leave Vatira back a little bit, and then he'll pass or boom the ball up the sidewall to Atto or Drally, who's kind of playing the corners of the wall. So they're kind of giving Vatira like the whole middle center back area of the field, and his job is just to feed it back up to his teammates that are upfield, and that is obviously working extremely well, and I think he's the best in the world at doing that. I think he's the best in the world third man right now, even though there aren't hard positions in Rocket League in the same way as like other sports are. I think it's undeniable how good he is and how great he plays on LAN, and so that's why I have him as number 3. Now, let's go ahead and just reveal the last 2. Nupo and Drally. Now, Nupo is probably a bit of a controversial pick, right? But to me, even though maybe it goes against some of the stuff I've said about team results, Nupo is so clearly the best player on Twisted Minds. If you took him off that roster, I think it's very realistic that if Nupo moved to Al-Qadsia or one of the other top contending teams in MENA, that would be team number 2 in MENA. I don't think Rise and Atomic have done enough to prove that they would have taken MENA's spot, because obviously those guys are EU, right? And now they're playing in MENA. So I think Nupo, as far as one player's ability, is higher than Rawas, TRK, Kalir's, Rise, Atomic. I think he's the best peaking player that we're seeing in MENA. I'm very high on him. I think this is the start of probably a long career for him in RLCS, and a high level career in RLCS. And as far as individual players, I actually rank him higher than these Falcon players, as you can see. I think without him, Twisted Minds probably isn't in this spot to be MENA number 2. I think I'm very high on him as a player. You guys let me know what you think, because obviously the results are a little too early to say, results, because Nupo really hasn't gotten those results for his team. They went top 8 in Birmingham, but we haven't really seen a long career from him yet, because long story, I'm not going to go into the whole backstory, but basically, I'm very high on his talent. I think he's going to continue to do well, and I think he's a name that we're going to see in the top 5 player list for a lot of lists, and I think he's earned that spot. When you look at him play, he plays faster, he plays more dynamic, and he's the type of player where if you saw him on any team, you'd be worried about that team. So I think he really does have that impact. Just a great player. Number 1, I do think is still undisputed Drally. It's number 1 player. He's who I had as number 1 on my Birmingham list as well. He's continued to show why he's the best player in the world, at least to me. And he is kind of the core of, well, I don't know if he's the core of Carmine Corps, because I think Vatira is kind of the core of K Corp, but Drally is definitely that dynamic offense, defense player. He gets touches on the ball, and he gets power on the ball that I think people don't expect or anticipate. And so you see he gets a lot of beats on other players based on just like little flicks or taps of the ball. He's really good at getting the ball around the defender, at least the first defender, and then challenging the second. So he's very good at creating 2v1s for Atto and for Vatira. And I think he's probably the best in the world at doing that right now. And he's just one of those players where if you see him take the side boost and he's got the ball up on the sidewall, he's about to put something very, very destructive on your net, and you've got to address it immediately. He's not a player you can let dilly-dally with the ball. You got to attack him immediately and take the ball away from him and get him away from the ball. So I do consider him the number 1 player in the world. I think he is proven that so far based on the results and his stats. And I'd be curious to, hear if anyone thinks differently. But to me, he's very clearly the best player in the world. And that's my top 25 list. Guys, let me know, who do you think I discounted? Who should be, in this top list? As you can see, I didn't have any APAC or SSA players. So, there's room for criticism there. I really like what Sphinx is doing at APAC. Not sure if he's a top 25 player in the world, though, based on what we're seeing from these other teams. Let me know if you think Reveal or Scribbles is higher than Kofor. Let me know if you think Justin or Cheese should be higher than Magic Bear. I feel like those are kind of some of the more controversial discussion ones. Let me know if you think I've got Nupo too high. Maybe that's another controversial take in here. If I've got First Killer too low or too high, he's always polarizing. And yeah, just let me know what you think. So here's my top 25 player list. Screenshot it and send it back to me if one of these players does really poorly or really bad or really well in the major, and say, hey, you forgot about this, or like, I bet you didn't see this coming, you underrated this player. But at the end of the day, I think this is a pretty solid list. Let me know if you feel differently, and have a wonderful day. Take care. Bye.